sign for everybody to see, do we? No. It's either a sign to us or we know it and we articulate it. I'm going to tell you a story. I used to be you, sitting here in MLMS for the Executive Leadership Council. I was sponsored into. I was also sponsored into the Strategic Pathways Leadership Week. Walked through my floor, and we had done some work sharing his story. But he noticed me and he said, "You know what? You're El Michelle, aren't you?" I was like, "Yes, sir." He told me his name. He said, "Call my admin, get on my books, okay? I need to talk to you." So I said, "Cool." And as most corporate communication functions in big Fortune 500 companies, it seemed as if this business unit, this man that looked like he ran this business unit, was about to become my client, okay? So I did what he said. I got on his books. In 30 minutes into the meeting, he asked me a question. He asked me, "Why are you here?" And it threw me. It really threw me because I didn't know what he was really asking me. I answered him though. The first thing I said was, "Well, my boss from 2002 when I was at Fleischmann-Hillard is embedded here at AT&T." And he said, and he interrupted me and he said, "No, that's not what I'm asking you." I said, "Okay." Okay, so AT&T has a wonderful reputation, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I thought that it'd be and he said, no, that's not what I'm asking you." And I said, "Well," and I was stuck. He said, "I want to know why you're here, because I want to know why someone as bright as you are, as fashion forward as you are, you're hip. Why are you here?" And I'm thinking at this point, this is a trick question. And it didn't occur to me that he was asking me a deeper question. And that question was, do you know your worth? Do you know your value? Well, he looked at me and he said, "Don't get mad at me. I'm asking you this question. Don't get mad at me." And I said, "Well, I'm very confused. I'm not angry." He said, "Well, just go and come back. We're going to do 30 minutes a month here in a mentoring session, okay?" So suddenly he's telling me he's going to do something for me instead of me doing something for him. I thought I had a new client. He became my mentor. So every month, like clockwork, 30 minutes a month, or 30 minutes a day, I'd go to his office and we have these conversations. So the next time I met with him, he said, "There's this leadership week that I want you to go to. In fact, my division is going to sponsor it. I'm going to call your SVP and let him know we're going to pay for it." And he was sending me to Strategic Pathways here at ELC. And you know, they have one in the East, they have one in the West. Back then they had one. Wasn't that long ago. But I met this other woman. Some of you may have come across Trudy Bourgeois. I don't know. Raise your hand maybe? Yeah, okay. Yes. Trudy was one of the facilitators for Strategic Pathways. And to this day, I call her a mentor coach. And I quote her throughout, so you're going to hear some of that. But she actually asked me to stand before the 200 women that they had gathered, kind of like in this room, and asked me to banter with her as a role play. She was going to be the chairman of my organization, and I was going to be me. And I was going to run into her in the elevator. And I was supposed to banter about the headlines. If you've been to Strategic Pathways, you've probably been through this. I don't know. But here she was, and she said, "Stand up, Ms. Smith." I said, "Okay." And she said, "I'm the chairman. Did you see the headline on the front page of Wall Street Journal?" I said, "Yes." He said, "It was about chicken fries and Burger King. What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, their same-store sales are up at Burger King because of these chicken fries. It's innovation. They took two things that people know very, very well, combined them, and made something totally different. Not much unlike what we're trying to do here at our company, combining the assets of Time Warner, the content with the pipes that we have at AT&T to create something totally new." And she said, "Good job, Ms. Smith." And everybody starts clapping. Later, she comes to me and she's like, "Ms. Smith, what do you want?" And I'm like, here we go again. Now, I've been told what I could want. In fact, people had plotted the course. Some people were talking about succession. But when I thought about what she was asking me, I really didn't have an answer. I was 46 years old. The hero in the book, not just mine but yours too, is your value. And if you can unlock understanding what your value is and be able to articulate it, not much is going to stop you. And let me tell you why. Value comes from the very inside, okay? There's a thing called intrinsic value. That comes from the inside. Extrinsic value comes from the outside. So let's talk about extrinsic value first. That's pretty easy. That's something you can count. In a lot of ways, it could be your market value. In fact, that mentor challenged me one day and said, I'm not asking you to leave, but I want you to go find out your market value. I said, go find out my market value. He said, yeah. He said, how do you think you'll do that? I said, well, I'll look on Glassdoor, I'll look on LinkedIn. He said, you got to do better than that. I said, okay, I'll interview. And I thought it was a trick question, because how many of you kind of feel like once you get to a great job, you're kind of supposed to just sit there and ride it out and be thankful for that great check, that incremental bonus that you have to bicker over every year?
Right.
You know, the stocks, if you're at that level. But he challenged me. He said, now if anybody says that I encourage you to leave, I'm just going to deny it, because I'm not. He said, but I need for you to go out and find your market value. So I did. I went out and I interviewed. And it was so interesting what I found out. Now, when I arrived at this organization, I had lowballed myself. I had just had my little baby girl, and I wasn't even expecting a call. And I did out of the blue. And they said, if you come and work for us, we'll stop the search. And I said, oh, are we having this conversation? Yes, we are. So ultimately, what I negotiated was the same amount of money I was making as an SVP at a global firm, but my title was senior manager. Now, you may say this apples to oranges, corporate jobs in corporate America and a global agency like an ad agency or a communications firm. But when you really think about it, I had the opportunity to try and get my value, and I missed it. How many of y'all have been in that situation where it's all about, as long as I get the money, I don't need the title. But you know what? You shave a lot off of your progression by doing things like that. Needless to say, I had been promoted, which was part of the reason why I ended up in a place like this. I was one of the higher potentials. You're all there right now. So ultimately, I found out my market value, and I understood that even if I took a lateral move with a director title, even at a smaller organization, I'd at least double my salary, at least. If I try to get back to the title that I had when I was at the global agency, I could triple or quadruple my money. As quiet as it's kept, the fastest way to make more money and get a better title is to leave. But how do you leverage that when you actually want to stay? Let me tell you a little bit about your intrinsic value. It's the most important thing. Put a pin on that double or triple your salary. It does do something to your psyche when you walk right back into that organization. But your intrinsic value, it starts with the very notion of the minute you were the twinkling in your parent's eye and you burst out into the world that you were fearfully and wonderfully made, and because that you are just here, the mere fact that you're on this earth, you are worthy and you are valuable. Let's start there. You are entitled to everything based on your willingness to be excellent and do the right thing. That's intrinsic value. Man, that takes you a long way. Your intrinsic value really is about understanding who you are and what problem you solve for the people you want to solve it for. And that's not just in work, that's in life. So, the villain in the book is fear. There's a war going on between your value, your perceived value, what you think you're valued, and how you communicate that value, and the fear that's in all of us. Things in corporate America for people of color, especially Black Americans, especially women of color, the double disadvantaged Black women, are real. Let's just face the fact. Microaggressions are real. Mansplaining is real. White-splaining is real. All of it's real. It's not in our imagination. And thank God we finally have books and people writing about this stuff. There's stats out there now. Thanks to women in the workplace. Thanks to Catalyst research. The numbers are all there. The data's there. It's not just our imagination. And this stuff can make us fearful. We also have our parents and the generation before us. I'm a student of culture. So I look at not just race, I look at generational. I also look at faith. It's a culture. And when you add up, for so many of us, the generational trauma that's passed down, have you heard of epigenetics? It's in our DNA. So this is real, y'all, okay? It's passed down through the generations, the trauma. We watched our parents. I know I watched mine. My dad kept his head down, and he was in federal government. He's one of the first people who weren't, Colin Powell and Speaking of People in Ebony magazine. But he was working for the federal government, and I watched my dad sometimes come home and have to bite his tongue about what really needed to be done while some white guy took credit for it. But he knew that in that situation, he needed to keep his head down because his generation was a generation of suffering and struggling and a war to try and get access. Our generation is a little bit different. One, we still need the access. But two, we have choices. We have choices that our parents didn't have. But still we're afraid. We're afraid to merchandise our work. We're afraid to speak up for ourselves. We're afraid to speak up for one another. If you know your value and fear is knocking at your door, sometimes fear will take over. How do you get through that? Well, I have good news for you. I've heard the word fearless. It's in the dictionary. You've heard it too. But it's not really real. God gave us this feeling for a reason. Fear is real. In fact, if you look into neuroscience, you'll find that fear is very, very basic to the way we're built. Let's say you're that mother in the bush with your young. And it's BC 500, okay? You're sitting up there taking care of your little person, and you hear a rustle in the bush. What do? Say it out loud. Grab your baby and attack, protect, run. Fight or flight. Fear is very basic to us. Fear is not going anywhere. So what do you do with the fear? Well, you know what? The very definition of courage or bravery depends on the fact that fear exists. There is no bravery, there is no courage without fear. And there have been great people that say, in order to get to where you want to go, you got to go through it. You got to go through the fear. So you got to push through. And that's how we get through. Do you know your value? When I asked, do you know your value, there is an implicit question involved here. And that is, do you know who you are? And I'm speaking beyond simply knowing your name, your surname, your people, your job title, the company you work for, the stats. I'm talking about beyond that. Let's go back to Trudy Bourgeois for a second. One of the exercises that she had us do that day in that 200 plus room session was something called your 10 most significant moments. Has anyone done this before? One person. All right, it's life-changing, isn't it? All right, what you're gonna do is you're gonna plot a straight line, just like a timeline, all right? And you're going to plot dots above and below the line. When you plot the dot above the line, Those are things that are awesome. They're good. They make you smile. You're proud of yourself. You slayed that thing. You killed it. Okay? Go as far back, and we're not just talking about work. We're talking about life. So that's work and personal. Okay? So start back as far as you can and think of the first most significant moment. Plot your diet. For some people, it's below the line. It's the challenges. It's the heartache. It's the ugly stuff we don't like to talk about. I don't want you to miss those things. When you do this exercise, do it by yourself. No spouses, no kids, no partners. This is cathartic. And I thought that this was like some bizarre corporate fix my life. Because everybody in that room was in tears and the tissues were just going everywhere. There were things that we had to come face to face with in this exercise. But the beautiful thing was, she told us to plot a bell curve. Connect those dots up and down. And you know, just like life, there are plateaus and there are valleys. But as you get to those bell curves, whether you're on an incline or a downward slope, ask yourself, what lesson did I learn? What did I learn between that divorce that I went through and feeling okay about myself once again and killing it at work, bringing home several awards on a plane from New York City? What lesson did I learn about myself? Those lessons come together as your leadership platform. That's the story that you're going to tell about yourself, good, bad, and otherwise. You'll also see some trends along the way. What I learned about myself was that as much as I thought I was artsy and creative and a writer, which I am, I was ignoring a very real trend in my life, and that was STEM. I love technology. I'm a geek. I love math. At 12 years old, my dad taught me how to solve the Rubik's Cube. And there I was with my little bitty fingers trying to compete with those big boys, teenage boys at the mall. I just dated myself. He also taught me how to program. Y'all call it coding? Yeah. He taught me how to do that too. And I would apply that learning later in life and build a business that I didn't even operationalize. I didn't monetize it, but it was pretty happening. It was before the social networks even became what they are, and I had something that was getting the attention of nationals. I'm an AKA, how many sorrows in the room? All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. That felt good. So it was a guest book. Am I dating myself? This is before Black Planet, y'all. Yeah, laugh now. Whoever put something in the guest book, you have to hit refresh, and then it would show up at the top of the list, and then someone else would type something in response and hit refresh, and it'd go to the top of the list. Very basic, very rudimentary, but I programmed that thing. But I didn't know that that was something you could make money for, and I wasn't trying to, I was just having fun. Tech, culture, and business. That's what I know that I can do for just about anyone who needs the help. If you look back on my story, you'll see those themes. You're going to see some of those themes too as you plot your line across your 10 most significant moments. Knowing your value is critical to being able to bet on yourself. We hear all of the career gurus, the coaches, who else? Gosh, the coaches. There are tons of coaches out there. But we talk about this a lot. Bet on yourself. It's almost a cliche. Bet on yourself. Go on, girl. Yes, bet on yourself. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean if you don't know your value? Anybody like slots? Anybody gamble in here? What if you don't know the value of the dollar bills in your hand, of the coins in your hand, and you don't know the value of the pot you're about to win? Can you bet? No, you can't bet on anything. So how in the world do you bet on yourself if you don't know who you are and what value you bring? Listen, let me tell you something else about knowing who you are. All this talk about be authentic, do you? How do you do you if you don't know who you are? This is the work that we have to do. And many of us, because we're high performing, and girl, we're slaying, man, brother, we're doing it. But that old black tax is on us, right? We've been told you gotta be 10 times as good to just get in the room, let alone play, right? But you're at a point right now where you've proven yourself. Your company knows it. That's why you're here. So what do you do now? What if I told you that your 50% is just as good or better than your mediocre colleagues' 100%? Think about it. You're already doing 10 times the work. You're doing 150 times, 200%. Wearing yourself out. Are they really paying you for that? You don't know that unless you know your value. Now, do you? Somebody want to say that again for the people in the back? You gotta know who you are. There's a richness to who we are. There's some stuff in our DNA, not just the trauma, but there's some stuff in our DNA that makes us perfect for innovation and transformational leadership. You know what innovation means? It just means making something out of nothing. Just like the chicken fries. Chicken, everybody knows it. It's on a global menu. Go anywhere in the world and you've got fried chicken on the menu. Have you noticed that? Everybody, pommes frites, French fries. Everybody is frying potatoes. Your grandmama fried potatoes for breakfast. Everybody knows about that. That's not rocket science, but they put those things together and increased same-store sales and pretty much saved Burger King to the brand that we know today. So, if you know how to innovate, you must know that you know how to make something out of nothing, and you got that from your grandmother. She was doing it already. You got that from your great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was on a plantation. She was born on a plantation. And then she went on to Tyler, Texas, and opened one of the first grocery stores in the early 40s, about the size of a Kroger or a Publix. She did it with a gun on her hip. Sure did. So listen, it's in your DNA. Some of this value finding that you need to do, get into your story and your family story and find out what they did to become who they were and how that bubbled up to you. So, in order to bet on yourself, you got to know your value. Betting on yourself requires bravery. Let me tell you something. The definition, the very definition of corporate is one body. One body. Now, if you understand that these institutions were built to center white maleness, I didn't say it. Women in the workplace said it. Catalyst said it. We knew it. But when you realize that it was not built for you, and you have people telling you, be your authentic self, you know that something's not adding up. If they don't really center me there, how in the world do I show up in all of my glory? They don't like me, even when I'm not showing up and showing out. How many of you have discovered that the more that you shine, it's a problem for some people? Yeah, this is the rub. We're telling you to walk in your power and be yourself in a place that does not center you. For women of color, black women, of course, you're doubly disadvantaged. Brothers, I'm not overlooking you. You're disadvantaged just because you walk through the door. Plus, you may even pose a threat. So let's just keep it real. It takes bravery to walk in your power. How do you do it? There's a concept in my book. We're going to skip ahead. You have to lean out to lean in. Because here's the thing. If that organization doesn't center you, what does? It must be outside of the organization. Think about it. The people who actually understood your value and understand your value, some of them may be inside your organization, but a lot of them are outside. There's a paradigm that I like to share, and that has to do with growing your community and your tribe and your network. And it looks like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is your tribe. We'll get back to that. Some people call it your personal board of directors, your kitchen cabinet. You've heard them all. They're at the top, okay? But in the middle there is your community. These are people that know you, know your work, respect you, will do something for you. And you know them and their work. You respect them and you'll do something for them. All of those criteria make up your community. These aren't just people that know you. That's your network. It's at the bottom of the pyramid. The relationship pyramid works like this. You nurture the network. As you get to know them, they get to know you. They become community members. And some of those people bubble up to the top. Become advocates, sponsors, mentors, peers that you can count on, even junior folks that you can count on. But that's a precious few, okay? So, your community can help pour your value back into you. Now, the deal is about this tribe or even growing your community is that they need to be outside of their organization as well as inside the organization. One, it keeps you grounded. It keeps you knowledgeable. It keeps you outside of the bubble, even though you're inside of the bubble. Because the minute you stay inside the bubble and just live that life, like so many people I know that just live and breathe that company. When it becomes transactional, which it always is, and you get that surplus notice, like I did, after the awards, the exceeds ratings, the high potentials and going to the ELC, speaking on behalf of the company, doing all of that stuff. And then my entire team was slashed. You recall how transactional it actually is. It's not a family. We use words like loyalty. Is it really loyalty? I mean, at the end of the day, they pay you for service. Yes? Okay. You do the service, they pay you. They may give you a little extra bump every once in a while, but it really is about doing the job and getting paid for it, right? So, you have to be able to lean outside of your organization to get to those peers, those folks who are junior who know things that you don't because you don't know about everything. Those people who are in power in different industries, different organizations, different disciplines, who can build your skills, mentor you, even bang on tables for you from the outside of the company. Go figure that out. Because your world should not center around that one job. The other thing that you have to do in order to lean out is to always be upskilling. Always be upskilling. Because when you come back in, it's going to make you more valuable. But for yourself, think about for you how enriching it is to know more, to educate yourself more. The other part about leaning out to lean in, here's Trudy again. She calls it F you money. I kind of liked it. In the book, I changed it because I wanted it in my church bookstore. So, it's that stash of cash that you have in case, like LaFern Kit Beatty says, the master coach, when it's time to say what needs to be said, you don't edit yourself because you know that you have opportunities outside. You know you're worth enough to know that I can start that business. In fact, I already have. You know well enough that your network is all over the US and possibly some other countries too. You know that someone else will hire you. There's a story in the book. You know, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I find myself at this Fortune 10, and it's so easy to get into the groove and the culture. I started unlearning some things that I knew better. But one day, there were 3 or 4 of us women. And I gotta tell you, this company has some good looking black folks. Oh, these people, I call them fine people, fine cars, fine clothes. And they were credentialed. These people were just black excellence, right? We're sitting together after attending a diversity, equity, and inclusion conference, and you've been in those sessions where everything was said and yay, but there was some stuff that needed to be said.
Yeah.
You know that stuff? So we're sitting out in the foyer having one of those girlfriend grab sessions, the meeting after the meeting, to talk about what should have been said. Yeah, hair flipping, everything. And I remember one of them saying to me, well, Michelle, you should have said it. Because I mean, after all, that was my role. I stood up diversity, equity, and inclusion corporate communication for the entire company. Well, certainly you could say it. And you know what I said? And before it came out of my mouth, I couldn't catch it. And when it came out, I was like, I can't believe I said that. Do you know what they do to me if I said that? The entrepreneur in me would never say something like that. But there I was in the bubble. I had become one of the fine people, fine cars, fine clothes, who was totally dependent in my head, which I wasn't, on that one paycheck. The one that allows you to get the Fendi bag whenever you want to, get the red bottom shoes, fly off to Fiji with your girls. Come back and argue over that incremental increase. Gary Vaynerchuk calls it golden handcuffs. Cheryl Grace, formerly of Nielsen, she's also an ELC member and also the CEO of Powerful Penny. She calls it being institutionalized. I'd been institutionalized and I didn't really realize it. Well, there was a white man that walked into the conversation. We didn't see him. He just heard me say, what would they do to me if I said it? And this nice guy, don't get me wrong, senior vice president, said, why wouldn't you say it, Michelle? I'd say it. And so we kind of looked at each other like, he wasn't invited, but go ahead. And he said, let me tell you why I would say it. Because what would I do? If they took my job, I'd just go find another one. Whoa. Yeah. Could it be that this white guy knew his value and we did not? And we had more degrees, probably in our pinky finger. The census reports black women have more advanced degrees than any other group out there. We got all the letters in the alphabet behind our names. But we'll sit there and say, what will they do to me? They take my job. That's that trauma, generation over generation. We do have choices, but when you recognize your value, that you had these interviews with all these other companies, that if you wanted to leave, you could, that you had this money in the bank, that you know how to start business inside, outside, you can do all of that. Recognize your value and your unique story and who you are. You can not only bet on yourself, you can become your best advocate. But you've got to be able to articulate your value. And that's what the slide is back here. Being your best advocate means prioritizing you. Prioritizing you. You know, it's interesting. I come from strategic comms background. I actually adjunct at my alma mater, Texas Christian University, and I teach seniors strategic comms and getting them ready for careers and that kind of thing. And it's very interesting to see this manifest on social media. How many of you have been called upon to be that brand ambassador online? And maybe they haven't formalized it, but they've given you the opportunity to, you know, plug in your handle. And whenever they have company news, just share it. Yeah, just opt in. You don't have to. Just opt in. You know, if you don't want to do it, it's fine. Whatever. So you share and share. Have you seen those people in your LinkedIn network, no names? They're just shoveling out the company news day after day after day after day. And you're wondering, like, sis, that's your platform.
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? And then when they move on to the next company, it's rah-rah for the next company. And you're wondering, wait, that's an opportunity to build your brand on social media. I like to counsel my clients to have the 80-20 rule. 80% you and your thought leadership, and 20% company. And the reason for that is you want to be found, and you want those opportunities to come to you. And besides the fact that you're alienating your community by just pumping out branded content. I mean, have you noticed how quiet they get? You actually get everybody from your company going, yeah! And silence from everybody else. And your LinkedIn profile probably has people all the way back from, when you first start working, maybe even beyond. They don't have much to say about that. But the minute you start to share your thought leadership on issues and trends that impact your industry, you start to see other people gather around your community. If only we knew our value. If only we placed as much value in our own name as we do in our company name, what would shift? What would shift? So, I'll tell you my little story. I told you that I got a surplus notice. Let me tell you how that went. So, the surplus notice came in an email. And I was actually on my way to speak at a university that afternoon. I had taken the afternoon off. And I got the surplus. And I did something that people thought was odd. I actually clapped my hands and I said they added to my story. Let me go talk to these students. So I had started a company, totally compliant. Don't go talking to Mr. Huntley, he knows. Totally compliant. Started a company around the idea of leadership and career. The first thing I did was I launched a podcast, which is going into its 4th year this month. 70 countries now. It debuted at number 6 on Apple Podcasts, Business News. But I started with the podcast, and then I had a mentoring platform called the 30-Minute Mentor. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Guess who was inspired by? That guy that asked me that challenging question. 30-Minute Mentor, because I was beginning to get people that I did not even know to say, will you mentor me? Mm-hmm. And I really believe that you really should know the person, believe in them. They should have some kind of respect for you too, because it is mutual and it is reciprocal. So if you were outside of my realm, I was going to ask you for an hourly fee. And it was working. So I was the CEO of No Silos Communications while I was still at this company. So when I met with the media and entrepreneurship class at the University of North Texas that afternoon, I introduced myself as the CEO of No Silos Communications, LLC. And I also startled them. I told them that morning I'd gotten a surplus notice. They didn't really know what that was. I said, it's a humane way of saying lay off. They give you 60 days, at least they used to, 60 days to find another job within the company. And they say, we're cutting the position, not the person. That's what they say. And so you go with that. And I wasn't really pressing the gas on interviewing because I'd actually found out my market value. There were organizations out there that were already showing interest. I had this little seedling of a business. I had FU money. I remembered that I had written down 6 things when I was 22 years old that I dreamed about doing. And as I recounted what was in that list, I had accomplished 4 of them. I only had 2 to go. So I was getting calls from officers at home after hours. We want you to stay. Just say the word. We'll help you stay. Do you want to stay? I'm like, thank you. I really appreciate that. Let me think about it. What do you have? So I went through the motions and went through whatever interviews they put in front of me. But the turning point was sitting in front of my SVP, who was now the Chief Communications Officer, clicking Topo Chicos. And he said, Michelle, what are you going to do? And I said, well, Saul, whatever you have for me, I'm going to look into it. But I have to be honest with you. I have some other opportunities. And can I tell you about this list that I wrote when I was 22 years old? He said, sure. I said, well, I said that I wanted to do things that I did not have the credibility, the connections, the credentials, all the C's that I didn't have when I was 22 years old. I went into public relations because it made me money. And so now I see that I ticked down the list already. I'm beginning to write books. I've been to see a publisher in New York twice already. I was about to get on the airplane and go for a 3rd round. I was already lecturing at universities. I had the consultancy that I said that I wanted. I had the little girl. I said I wanted to start a family. I started a family. Brother didn't stick around, but I had the baby. So I had that one too. I had 2 more to go. One was to be a talking head on television, a subject matter expert on culture and tech. And the last one was that I wanted to be speaking and getting paid for it around the world. I only had 2 more to go. And he looked at me, he said, "You're not gonna stay, are you?" I said, "Well, let's think about this. If I do stay, you guys have already been taking a lot of arrows from me just because I've been speaking on behalf of a company. If I start publishing books and doing TED Talks, are you ready for the backlash?" He said, "We'll stand with you." I said, "I appreciate that." He said, "You're gonna leave, aren't you?" I said, "I owe it to myself." And I did. That's the story. And I hope that you will take the time to do the work and discover your unique value and begin to articulate it. I'll give you this one more thing. You've got to activate your tribe. Many of you have assembled them, you got your mentors, your sponsor, and all that kind of stuff. You got to activate them. Until you can articulate your value, one step up from that is your mission. It's how you put your value to action. That's what you need to share with your tribe in order to activate them on your behalf. All right, I'll take questions. And that's Kwesi. Oh my gosh, y'all. I'm gonna tell y'all about Kwesi in a minute, go ahead. Oh, come on and get in line.
Hi, I'm Christina Frederick. I'm a senior HR business partner at a tech startup. I'm very clear on my values,
Good.
my superpower, all the things. I've worked and been mentored by Trudy, so I have all of that.
Awesome.
One thing that I'm interested in is that did you ever have a point in your life where life was lifing?
Oh, it's right now, honey.
It's like I have to pull back to make sure everything is like good.
Yeah.
Even though I'm aware. And then how did you kind of catapult yourself back into the push?
Okay.
So, I'm a mom of a 2- and 4-year-old, COVID baby.
I feel you.
All the things.
Yeah.
It's like I'm clear, but at the same time, I'm still recuperating from 2020
Yes.
and 2021.
Yes, life is lifing for a lot of us in this room, right? Adulting, oh, really? Okay, so I have aging parents, add that to the mix, okay? So I'll give you a story about what's going on in my world right now. Yes, please. 7 ways to say I'm entitled to the secret, to the C-suite. Secrets women of color need to know now to get their happy and thrive in an exclusive corporate culture. That's the next one in the franchise. It was due out last year. I had to stop. I'll stop there in the story and give you some insights from neuroscience. So they say that the brain does this thing called memory overload. And that just means that things are racing at us so much, our brain is cluttered. And it stops us from being insightful. Insight is critical to creativity and innovation because you have to focus. So what they say we need to do in neuroscience is to stop and clear our mind. And sometimes that means that we have to let go of some things in order to clear your mind. So in my situation, I had a little girl. You'll know more about Joni in a minute because she wrote that other book up there. She's 10 now. She was 9 when she did it. During the pandemic, it was rock'em sock'em. We were churning out books, man. We were doing everything. And then the pandemic kind of is doing what it's doing. And then life happened. So she encountered bullies at school so badly that I had to take her out and homeschool her while I'm running a couple of companies. Yeah, and I have aging parents who are boomers that don't really understand the Gen X or Gen Zer. Yeah, who's gonna backstop me, and then sometimes there was war that just exploded in my house while I was trying to work. I had to be able to be okay putting the book off, even though I had announced it. Put the book off, peel back on some things, and know that it was okay. I think because we know this old black tax exists, and sis, because you are a woman, and we put everybody ahead of ourselves. We do. Put everybody ahead of ourselves. At some point, you have to just stop and say that I need to take it slowly and give yourself some grace. One way to do it is to practice the gratitude and look back on the things that you've accomplished, because you'll be amazed at how much you got done. When I look back and said, well, wait a minute, if I don't get this book out, it's not the end of the world, because look at what I did in the first quarter of this year. Most people don't do that in their whole life. So give yourself a break, clear your mind, and let yourself get back in the game only when it's time. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Sharice Woods.
Hi, Sharice.
My question needs a little, just a tiny bit of backstory. So, I'm getting married in a month. And
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I feel, I'm a visionary in my household. And so
You are.
I am very much so the person, I want to be like powerful couple. I want us
Yes,
to be
ma'am.
amazing.
Yes, ma'am.
And so my fiance, he is like a brilliant mind. He's excelling in his career. However, he is that he operates in that fear of what's on the other side.
Sure.
And so any tips that you can give or advice of like how to encourage somebody to step outside of, because when you can see the potential in somebody else, like, how do you encourage? Because I'm at that point in my career where I'm like, what's next? I think I might have hit that part. He's like, Rusty, man, we're gonna start a family, you wanna change now?
Well, and let me tell you, this is the beautiful thing about marriage.
Yeah.
You're different. He is who he is, you are who you are. And any therapist I've run into, even in marriage counseling, usually tells me, how do I change my actions? Not necessarily with the idea of telling him what he needs to do. So sis, I would encourage you, what would you need to do to fall back and do you and allow him to see that? Because listen, if he sees it in action, he may just be inspired, but it's not on you to try and make him into the, no. Okay.
My name's Torrance Finello.
Hi, Torrance.
Development manager with Cisco. Question for you. You touched on a lot of great things, so thanks for this session.
You're welcome.
The question I have for you is, could you share some tips and strategies around the value exchange? Like, how do you know that you're getting a fair value?
Ah.
Because, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, well, benchmark your value first, okay? Know what you bring to the table. And then go out there, like I said, go figure out what other folks are paying for it, okay? See how other people value it. Like Google search will even show you news stories on whether something is valued or not. Sometimes people are like, well, how do I know? I'm afraid to take this leap and go to this other company. I don't know how they're going to be. And I'm like, well, what would you do to find out? And the answer usually is talk to some people, read the headlines. Information is the best weapon to battle fear, and especially the unknown. So I would dig in and find out what that value actually is, see what other folks are doing, benchmark, and then get back to it. Does that help? Awesome.
Hello, thank you so much for your
You're welcome.
My name is Sandra Lobo, and I work at BMS.
Awesome.
My question really is, how do you recalibrate? So, say, in my case here, this is what I call my second missionary journey. My first class, I was a consultant, and started when I had children, and then went back into the workforce. Now I'm in the workforce, I'm just happy to be in the workforce.
Sure.
Of course, I don't know my value. I do know where I should be, where I should, but at least I don't know. I know at least where I should be, but I don't know how far high I should be. I think I should be when I just got in. But then, listening to you now, there are things that I should have done that I haven't done. how do you know how to reposition yourself when you're already in a position where you're supposed to be comfortable, but now carrying all the kids is not really what you should do that sometimes?
You know, it's a very vulnerable place to be, where you stepped out of the work situation to mother, to parent, to life, whatever it might be, and you're coming back in because you do wonder what your value is. I usually tell my clients to shake the trees on their community, okay? Shake the trees. These are the people, remember, that know you, know your work, remember you. And you know, your brain got caught up in raising the kids or whatever you were doing, okay? And now you're back. You need people to remind you of who you are. Find out who that is in your community. Lean into them and let them pour into you. You know what, before we take the next question, I have a couple of signed copies that I wanted to give away before you guys get away, okay? Signed copy of No Thanks, the Remix. This is the second edition. 2/3 more content. It's award-winning by the National Association of Black Journalists. Yay. And then my daughter, who was inspired in the midst of me writing the first edition, wrote her own at the age of 8. It's a children's book. It's called No Thanks for Girls, 7 Ways to Say I'm Beautiful, Strong, and Enough. So if you stick around after these last 2 questions, we'll do a little trivia game to give them away.
Thank you. My name is James.
Hi.
I did a global data analytics for Amazon.
Okay.
So, quick question. I listened to your story, very amazing story. At some point in your career, I believe you faced situations where you bring your authentic self and present your value to leaders. What made you succeed in those kind of discussions?
Yes. Absolutely. I didn't do it alone. That tribe that I talk about is very real. In fact, I needed to go get mandates for some of the ideas that I had. I got a mandate from an SVP who told his VPs to go for it, who talked to people around his peers, and they bought in on it. You've got to have people more powerful than you to get your message across and get your ideas across. So don't try and do it by yourself. There were people in the background making these things happen. Okay.
Hi, my name is Shannon Randall.
Hi, Shannon.
I'm from Cisco in the tech sales world.
All right, Cisco.
So, quick question. I'm in a leadership program within my company, and one of the exercises where we had to ask our peers and leaders how they view us. And
Okay.
they give us feedback so that we can go through the program. And I was really excited about all the feedback that I got, because I was super authentic at work, and that's why I'm good in sales. But one of the people I had to respond basically said, I wish Shannon knew her work is so phenomenal. But part of me being authentic is wearing it on my sleeve and meeting people where they are. When I don't know something, I say I don't know it.
Sure.
And it's interesting, like, I have the highest degree of anybody in my chain. Like, former lawyer, came over to sales. And still, I thought I was showing up just authentic. But I have this branding a little bit with some people of not showing up and knowing my work. So how do you transition to switch that brand over?
First of all, it's a reputation. That's what people say about you. Your brand is your intentional experience that you create. So what you have to do is make sure that you're creating an experience that communicates that you are a strategist, that you know your worth. So I would ask you, there are small gestures and large gestures. What small gestures can you do when you go back into the office on Monday, that would start to position you as someone who knew her value? Ask yourself that question, and then start thinking about the large gestures. And I call those the gestures where you actually take the speaking off. You're actually posting thought leadership. Those things that put you in front of a crowd. And how can you show up as someone that knows her value? Now, one thing as Black women, as women in general, sometimes we come to work and we do the housework. You know what I'm talking about? We're the one in the meetings taking notes. All right, we're the scribe. We show up and we do the extracurriculars. We plan the extra whatever, right? The party. We plan the potluck. Exit from those things. You're a leader, okay? Start positioning yourself as a leader. Become consultative and become strategic, and that's going to help you a lot. All right, let's do a couple of trivia questions. The first trivia question is this. What company was I working for when I met that guy on the 37th floor? There you go. All right, congratulations. All right, let's see. What is the, oh, I'm not gonna do that because it's on there. Oh, okay. What is the name of the podcast that I started? That was a mentoring platform. No. Okay, I'm gonna give another question. It's the Culture Soup podcast. Okay, so the other thing is, how old was Joni when she wrote this book? 9. Who said 9? All right. She signed it too. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.